Hi, my name is Tara Kachaturoff, and I'm the host of Michigan Entrepreneur, where we feature businesses from startup to stellar. Today I have as my special guest Rami Paulus, president of Midwestern Janitorial. Welcome to the program.
Thank you very much for having me.
Well, I'm really excited to have you on today. And to get us started, why don't you tell us a little bit about how you started Midwestern Janitorial?
Sure,
what led up to it?
Yeah, I was an actor and a writer from my early 20s to mid 20s. I was a drummer in local heavy metal bands in my teens. And when I met my now wife in Los Angeles, I got serious about building a family, leading a family, and one of the things I wanted to do was own a business, because I'd spent so many years being unemployable, I wasn't going to get a real job. And but the next question was, well, what could I do? I had no hard skills. I had spent no time cultivating anything except a creative mindset. So I had great soft skills. I loved people. I loved to create. I loved to produce. And I could spot interesting opportunities. So I started to look at many industries, and I found janitorial. I looked at probably 30 things in order to lead me to where I am. And when I found janitorial, I found that most customers were not happy with their janitorial. They were overpromised and underdelivered. Most employees didn't feel that they were working for a great company. The companies were in a perpetual cycle of selling to customers and selling to employees. Losing customers, losing employees, and always sort of turning over and caught in that vicious cycle. And so I just thought, well, what happens if I only go after the best customers and the best employees and marry the two together? Do I have to be caught in that vicious cycle? And it turns out, not at all.
Now, did you have that kind of insight when you first started it, like before you started it, or did you kind of come to that after you started it?
I had the insight, but it wasn't clearly articulated the way I'm articulating it now. I'm articulating it now with hindsight, but I knew at the time this was precisely the problem that I wanted to solve. So at the time, it was really, what I really thought to myself was, the problem I'm going to solve is I'm going to focus not on customers, but on employees. So I'm going to put all of my focus on employees. I'm going to attract the best. I'm going to become the kind of leader that's worth them staying. And then the customers might take care of itself. It might not. It was an experiment. I didn't know if it would succeed, but it's worked brilliantly, because all you need is a couple of customers to not have the turnover that they're used to having with other companies to start talking. And that became the sort of the central focus of what we were known for.
Now, one of the things that you've done is you've decided to specialize. Can you talk a little bit about your niching and where that came into the process for you? Was it something out of the gate, or did you decide to do this later? First of all, what's your niche? You have a very specific niche.
We have two niches. One is strictly medical. The other is strictly indoor sports. So we started with indoor sports. Our first customer had a 500,000 square feet of indoor sports complex. And I decided that was my niche because, well, that's what I had, and I had nothing else. And I knew enough at the time to know that articulating a niche would help position me as the expert. So that was our niche first. 2 years in, when I realized how good we were at retaining great talent, then I was able to say, now where's the best place to leverage this? And after some analysis, I found that medical. The medical space needs reliable contractors to do their job as promised, more than any other space does. And they have the funding to pay the premium necessary for the contractor to succeed in doing that. So yeah, 4 years ago we started to specialize in medical, and that's been fantastic. It's a happy accident that when the pandemic came, I was so perfectly positioned. I didn't know that was going to happen, but you know,
that was probably quite the boost to business as well.
It was good.
At that point, everybody's companies were falling apart.
That's right.
And yours didn't.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about that, because you were the exception of what happened to everybody else's companies during the pandemic. You were very successful in retaining your employees. Let's talk about that. And what did you do how did you make that happen?
Well, I was employee focused when the pandemic hit. I was already my default setting was to be employee focused. So when the pandemic hit and the whole world basically discovered in one way or another that their employer was not focused on their best interests. I did not have that problem. My people were thoroughly convinced on their own accord that I really was, and it wasn't because I made up some story for them. It was, the proof was they were being paid more than their cohorts. They had radical economic incentives just for staying, because again, I wanted to solve the turnover problem. So if you stayed with me for a year, and this happens every single year, you'll get a bonus at the end of the year worth 10% of your annual income. So if you made $30,000 this year, expect $3,000 at the end of the year, just for staying. And well, once you receive that and we build that trust and they go, wow, this really happened, why would they go anywhere else? So I already had this going on when the pandemic hit, and lucky for me, we were able to just,
And this should be kind of a, when you run the numbers and you do the costs of turnover, which are very high. I mean, there's recruiting costs, advertising costs, interviewing costs, the mental stress on everybody in the company of having new people come in and out and in and out. It affects the team and the team dynamic. It's just a small price to pay when you think about what it costs people and that continual kind of thing, that turnover, which, look what happened during the pandemic. You knew which companies were employee focused, very few of them, because people were leaving in droves.
Yes.
And the kind of things that happened between management and workers, it was astounding.
Yeah.
You really saw who cared about people. And obviously, your company just sailed right through this. But you didn't do this after the fact.
No.
You lived it before.
Yeah, I mean, I started doing this again because I largely out of fear and insecurity. I thought, I don't have anything that a business person needs truly to know going in. I didn't have a template. Again, all I had was the soft skills, creativity, a love for people. So that's all I could do, was just maximize and optimize the potential of those two things.
I wonder if, just it is very challenging to be an actor in Hollywood. I think maybe even some of those things of just what it's like. I mean, you know what it's like as an individual and wanting to work, and you're competing with tens of thousands of other actors for parts and movies and TV. That probably had something to do with, underlying.
Absolutely, absolutely.
That's
a lot of putting yourself out there, a lot of getting rejected is very good for character building. It's very good. I would recommend it. I would recommend it to any young person.
No, but I mean, there really is a lot to learn from that. And what I really like is the fact that you niched and you got into something, but you looked at the niche. You analyzed where is the need, where is the funding. It's nice to do things in certain niches, but if there's no cash there, there's no economic incentive.
No, of course.
You can live a passion, but you'll go broke doing it.
100%.
So
100%.
You have to be practical. I mean, you're in business to be in business.
Absolutely. And the only reason that I can say we retain people is because on the other side of that, I'm attracting premium paying clients. Again, I wouldn't be able to retain people without the funding to retain them or to attract them to begin with. It's that I'm getting the right clients who have the right value placed on this.
Yeah, because I mean, they are in the people business too. Number one, healthcare is all about people. And if you don't have clean places and people don't trust that, they have no business.
Yeah, absolutely.
So they get that model.
Yeah. And actually my niche is even more hyper-specialized than just medical. It's actually ownership groups who have several geographically decentralized clinics. Okay, so that's even more specific. Their problem is bigger. Now, they need continuity. Across all those clinics, but they're geographically decentralized. So they're either going to have to go with multiple contractors, or they're going to have trust and relationship with one that they know can fire off the cannons properly on a day-to-day basis so that it all goes smoothly. And that's another.
And that is another.
That's another
great lesson. You got to put these in a book. Rami, you got to put them in a book. No, seriously, it's time for a book. Because that's so important. I mean, you looked for something that already had a built-in network, which means built-in clientele for you, and the continuity. And it's not like you had to get 10 clients. You have one client who has 10 facilities.
That's correct.
And that just
that's correct.
This is like
But
beautiful.
that's also driven by fear and insecurity, because I knew I couldn't sell to 100 people.
Right.
I thought maybe if I'm lucky I could sell to 10, and they better have big portfolios if I'm going to end up with a good business.
And this is all about leveraging. It's leveraging your mental bandwidth, because to manage 100 distinct clients is different than handling 10 with 10 sites.
Absolutely.
I mean, the whole,
Absolutely.
the economies of scale, it's just for everybody, and the continuity. Yeah, I mean, that is just such a beautiful, beautiful, elegant business
Thank you very
model.
much. That's very
I love
kind
it.
of you. Thank you.
I love it.
I really appreciate that.
It needs to be in a book.
Okay.
Short book, it can be a Kindle, but it needs to be there because these are really basic lessons that people need to know. They sound obvious, but unless you're doing it, I mean, you're thinking through the math, you know, starting here and thinking through the math into the future, you're not going to be thinking, you're going to be thinking one client at a time versus let me get a network going here. I mean, that's fantastic. And also, you had mentioned that you initially got into doing large, I guess, sports facilities.
Indoor sports complexes.
Indoor sports complexes.
Indoor soccer complexes.
Indoor soccer. So that's kind of specialized too.
Yeah.
So you're not just doing like.
Well, it just so happens that the indoor sports community locally is dominated primarily by the sport of soccer, but they have other sports going on there too, but that's the dominant sport.
Oh, I see. Okay, well that's interesting. And you have another company that's Clean Complex USA.
Clean Complex USA, and so the big difference in medical is you're focused on granular details when you're cleaning a medical space, and so the strategy to put a team on 10 clinics to clean granular details is much different than putting a team who's going to clean 500,000 square feet.
Right.
Because that team, their job is to focus broadly on turning over the facility for tomorrow's next, 3,000 customers.
Right.
That's much more broad. It isn't granular. It's macro thinking.
Now, I mean, I don't really know like a lot about the industry, but when you're doing medical facilities, do they have certain different kinds of cleaning checklists than they do in like just another kind of business? Are there certain kinds of standards or OSHA kinds? I mean, I don't know.
There's different standards. There's OSHA standards, but I would love to say that the list is different, but that's not true. It's just that what's different is that it requires the standard of care you would think
anybody would ask.
Any customer would ask for, but most customers wouldn't get. But when it comes to medical, you can't risk not getting it. I mean, you could. You see some of the local hospitals and how they look; they gross you out, and that's okay. That's everybody. It's not easy to figure these things out, but they need it more than anybody else does. So the same list applies. It's just that now you've actually got to pursue the ends of that list. You've actually got to deliver. Right. Or their problems are bigger.
So are you in the hospital space at all?
I did a short and gigantic project with Michigan's largest hospital network last year, and that was huge for us. So it paid dividends in terms of personal growth and figuring out how to take on a huge project of that scale and manage it properly.
Was it all the pieces that are like on their campus?
Yes.
Oh my goodness!
But it was short term, and it was planned. It was planned that way. They needed us for a 4-month project because they were short on in-house employees, and.
Do these facilities usually have their own?
They usually do it in-house.
Oh, really? I didn't know how that was done.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's usually in-house, but these days, it could be either. You're not exactly sure.
Right.
When you're
anymore
taking a meeting.
Because they can't. Nobody can retain employees even now.
Yeah. So that was great. That was amazing.
Yeah, and that's some good insight into that other world. And I didn't know what their business model was. That's interesting.
Yeah.
That's interesting because that seems odd that they wouldn't have that completely farmed out.
Right. Well, yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So, I just love the things that we've been talking about today, and I'd like to go a little bit more into. You recently wrote an article that's out there on LinkedIn for anybody who wants to connect with you. And it had to do with about being a talent magnet and some of the key things. And I'd like to talk about some of the things that were in the article just real lightly.
Sure.
But because it was such a great artitle. And of course, having the backup of our discussion today really fills in a lot of the gaps there. But one of the first things you talked about in being a talent magnet and bringing those right people in, because if you don't have the right people, nothing else is going to matter.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't want to sell anything with the wrong people on the team.
Right.
But you talked about researching the competition. Can you discuss that a little bit? What do you mean
remind me
by
what
that?
you're referring to?
This was the Talent Magnet article.
Researching the competition.
And like what they're doing in terms of how they're attracting people and what their models are?
I can speak to that, but I think I could be wrong. What you might be referring to is that I encourage prospective employees to research the competition.
Okay.
And also to do their due diligence in speaking with my current employees.
That was one of the key things I really liked, is that you wanted them to talk to actual people.
Yeah. So when you're sitting in an interview as an employer, it's typical to ask for a couple of references. But what's really not typical is to say, here's a couple for you. You call some employees and see if is this a cool place to work? Do we follow through with our promises? Et cetera, et cetera. And obviously, once you do that, you've built huge credibility. Even if they never make the call, just the fact that you presented it builds huge credibility. But you know, if somebody's super sharp and they're really diligent, they're going to make those calls. And when they do, when you start that relationship now, you're starting it with a high degree of trust. You don't have to spend the next couple of months slowly and painfully building trust. You're starting there. And now it's about keeping the relationship going.
Yeah, your onboarding process starts way before they even get to hiring them. And what's good about it, what I like about it, it's different than when, like in corporate, we would go and we'd have a team interview where you got 3 employees glaring at you, you know, and it's kind of like the Inquisition, which is very much stress and it's not casual. I mean, it's 3-on-1. We've all done those fun interviews, but this is different. You're giving them the option. You can call them and you can ask the questions you want. Nobody's sitting there waiting to grill you. And I think that whole dynamic completely changes the mindset, because you're also going to see, are they a take charge person? Are they going to even do this?
Absolutely.
And that just tells you a lot about a person.
And the dynamic of the interview is much like this. I serve a cup of coffee and we sit down and we just talk, get to know each other.
Do you interview each person yourself?
I do.
You do.
So far I do.
So far
I do, yeah.
Because but you don't have to do a lot of that because you retain your people.
I don't have to do a lot of that. So, you know,
And then one of the things we talked about already was your bonus system, which is based on tenure.
Yes.
And do you recall when or where in the process you decided to go that route?
Yeah.
Because that's not a lot of companies do that.
Yeah, 6 months. 6 months into running the business, and I was, you know, I was really running it very poorly. I was mismanaging people. I didn't know how to attract the right people. If I had the right people, I didn't know it, and I didn't know how to keep them. They were leaving very quickly. I just was getting my feet wet. I did not know what I was doing. And so when my back was really against the wall, I had to kind of think, again, using creativity as one of the only weapons I had, what am I going to do differently? And so the first job is, when I'm marketing to prospective employees, how am I going to extract the best out of the bunch? There's a bunch. There's the best there. How do I speak just to those people, so those are the only people who will show up to the interview? I want to filter everybody else out first. That way, when I know that the best are showing up, now we can have the casual conversation. I can get the most competent people to share their vision for their life and what's important to them. And okay, so now I've attracted them. Now how do I keep them? And the 10% bonus was sort of, it was just, I don't know, it felt economically just right for me. It felt affordable. It felt very meaningful for them. If you're making $30,000 a year, $3,000 at the end of the year is a serious lifestyle change, right? That's a vacation. It's all kinds of things. It's a remodel of a bathroom. It means a lot.
Put it in the bank for retirement.
Totally. So yeah, okay. Well, if I've attracted the best people and now I am retaining them, now I have time to actually develop their skill set, right? Like, you could want great janitors cleaning in your building, but if you're turning people every 2 weeks, when do you have time to make them great exactly?
And now you want to actually, you're incentivized to actually invest in them because you're playing the odds game. They're probably going to stay, so I'm going to invest. Not that it works like A for B trade, but it changes the whole dynamic.
It changes the dynamic.
It
changes the dynamic. And they invest in me and my vision, and I invest in them and their personal vision too. You know?
And one of the things you also mentioned was that, you know, you get to know these folks and you get to know, like, what do you value? And, you know, you get to know them as people and, like, what their interests are. And I really like that, you know. And that's one of the things about, you know, you're not some, like, sea of humanity with 10,000 people at your
Right,
company.
right.
You get to know people,
Right.
and you know their names and what they care about and who they care about and
Yeah,
their families,
yeah.
and that makes such a difference. People are
Yes.
tired of just being like a number and
Yeah.
a like faceless person
Yeah.
that doesn't matter.
Yeah, and for very, very large companies with 10,000 employees, and God bless them, they're doing excellently.
Well, actually, they're
you
not,
can't.
because all their people are turning over
Well,
in mass
yeah. I mean, they're doing excellently. They're doing excellently in some ways,
Right.
and they're doing poorly in other ways. But still, they managed to build a huge company. I haven't done that, so who am I to say that they're doing it wrong? It's just that my company is small enough and contained enough that I can do what I like to do, which is connect with people. I can
Yeah.
do that for only so long. Who knows when that's no longer feasible? But I actually hope that that's always going to be feasible. I actually hope that I'll stop the growth at the point that it's no longer feasible.
And you'll have
We'll
other
see.
people to help with that, make it
We'll see.
feasible.
Yeah.
It will
Yeah,
work.
yeah.
I definitely believe that. So, I know this has been quite a journey for you. And what do you think has been one of the most important lessons you've learned from being an entrepreneur and diving into a world that has a lot of uncertainty, and you've eliminated a lot of it by the way you run your business. But what's been one of the biggest lessons you've learned along the way?
First is when you're getting into business for the first time, everybody who's smart around you will tell you it's not a good idea. And in a way, they're right. They'll say, what do you know about this industry? What do you know about business? They'll give you all the stats of failure, and they're right, mostly, right? Where they're wrong is if you have serious guts and undeniable belief in yourself, that stuff doesn't matter, because you'll have something unique to offer. You'll tap into it eventually, and if and when you do that, all that stuff doesn't matter. It turns out you'll have something unique you're selling that solves real problems for real people, and they will want it. And so what that, and I still don't know a lot about business 6 years in. I really don't. If you put me in a room with a bunch of entrepreneurs, they're going to talk about things and use certain language that I'm still not familiar with. Turns out it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't.
Bottom line, you know that you're successful.
It's a creative process, yeah.
Yeah, and I think one of the words that you've used a great deal is creativity, and that's what it's all about.
Yeah.
And that's why you've done things strategically and surgically, and it's made all the difference.
Yeah.
And you have a kind of a light business because it's not all burdened by heavy thoughts and not knowing what to do with people. Like, you got it down. You got the people down, you got the niche down, you got the people caring down, you've got the business model that's built on the client having the model.
Yes, that's correct.
The client with the model.
That's correct.
Is your model.
That's right.
I mean, that to me is really, it's brilliant, and it works.
I thought that was obvious. I thought everybody else was doing that. I appreciate that you're saying
they're
it's brilliant.
cultivate one at a time, lose one at a time, go get another one at a time. It's like this treadmill of, it's the merry-go-round.
Yeah.
And no, it's a beautiful model, and it just works amazingly. And by not doing other things, you've made your life a lot simpler.
I think so.
So you can take time to actually come here and talk to us about it, right?
Yes. Yeah, it's cool. Which is cool.
So you're all about selecting your talent carefully and choosing your clients wisely. Those are two things that I read in something that you've posted in social media.
Yeah.
And you are involved in social media, you're involved in the community, and that's another thing. You have the time to do that because you've got a business model that works.
Yeah. Well, if I was chasing new customers and chasing new employees, I would not have the time to do that, but thank God.
That's right.
Yeah.
So if you quickly looked back at like these 6 years, what's one thing you may have done differently sooner on than you did, if you could redo? What would you have done that you knew about? That I knew about that I didn't do? Yeah, right away. Would there have been something you would have done early on if you could?
I would have probably spent a period of time, let's say 6 months, 7 days a week, very, 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 very focused on learning marketing. Since I was going to end up becoming so hyper specialized in these two spaces that I'm in, it probably would have done me good in the very beginning to really understand how you market a hyper-specialization, just so, right? Because I'm hyper-specialized, but I probably haven't optimized that opportunity very well. Who knows? Who knows?
Are you doing that now to the full extent of your capabilities?
No, not at all. Not at all.
Will you do it by the time you come back for another interview?
Maybe I should. It's come out, right?
Now we put the pressure on you.
Maybe I should. Yeah. No, I've relied solely on relationships.
Well, they're everything.
Yeah, they
They're everything.
Yeah.
And this again, book content. You're ready for the book. It's time. It's time.
Okay.
So as we come to the end of our time together, and we've covered so much great stuff here today, it's just been a wonderful, wonderful interview. What would you say it would be like one piece of advice you could give to entrepreneurs before you write that book? You know, what would it be?
Find a niche to specialize in, because in the absence of a niche, you have to be everything to everybody, and the chances of you being good are low, very low, right? But if you find one little slice of the pie, first of all, you'll hone your craft over the course of time to accommodate that slice of the pie very, very well. And secondly, from a marketing and sales standpoint, you'll be positioned as the person who knows the most about that prospect's problem. And like in my case, if you're poor in sales and marketing, the clients will come anyways, because you're the person who's serving their needs the best.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Great advice.
Thank you.
Rami Paulus, president of Midwestern Janitorial.
Appreciate you, Tara. Thank you very
All right.
much. Be well.
If you'd like more information about our program, please visit us at MichiganEntrepreneurTV.com. Please join us again in the future when I interview another enterprising entrepreneur. Until then, wishing you the best of business.